I would say the first one is definitely using fertility as that wake up call, right? It's a chance to not only assess your sperm quality, but your health habits. And like we talked about, the things that you do today are going to impact your results 3 months down. So making sure that nutrition and movement and sleep, stress, the things that we do on a day to day are in line, that's a big thing.
Welcome to the Advanced Women's Health Podcast, where we empower women with the latest insights and advice on holistic health. From cutting-edge medical research to practical wellness tips, our mission is to help you thrive at every stage of life. Join us as we explore topics ranging from hormonal balance and reproductive health to nutrition and mental well-being. Whether you're seeking solutions for a specific health concern or simply want to enhance your overall wellness, you're in the right place. Let's embark on this journey to better health together. This is the Advanced Women's Health Podcast.
Hi, everybody. Welcome. So it's Dr. Lauren here from Advanced Women's Health in Kingston, and I'm with Dr. Sasha from our Port Credit location. And today we're going to talk about sperm health. And I think we talk about women's fertility all the time, but plot twist, male fertility is actually up to 50% of fertility struggles that are actually linked back to sperm. So I think we want to open the conversation and just say, hey, let's talk about it and kind of go from there. Yeah. So Sasha, introduce yourself a little bit and before we dive into things.
Yeah, I'm so excited to be here. As Dr. Lauren mentioned, my name is Dr. Sasha. And when I think about fertility, right, like there's so many patients that come into our office, and oftentimes that spotlight shines on the women, but that sperm piece is about 40 to 50%. And so it's a fascinating window into your whole body health. And so I'm excited to look at nutrition, lifestyle. I know we have some myths that we were kind of rocking through prior to getting on here and just really breaking down how things are made and what determines quality, quantity. So I'm excited to get right in. I know we have some fascinating facts to share.
Yeah, I think it's such an important conversation, right? Because obviously our clinic being called Advanced Women's Health, we so often see the female partner and kind of we're assessing the female side of fertility. And a lot of times that male side will ask questions about it, but the reality is they're not often our patients. And I think there just needs to be a bigger conversation about, hey, has your partner been assessed? Do they have a semen analysis? Especially like oftentimes if they're already involved with a fertility clinic, they'll have that initial workup. But we support a lot of people before they've even been referred to fertility clinics. So that's something that we're like, okay, do we want to get a baseline semen analysis? Do we want to get some blood work, some pieces there to say, okay, we're focusing on you, but are we missing a piece of the puzzle by not looking at your partner as well? So I think I'm really excited for this conversation because it's one that we're often having in our offices and with our patients and kind of how to think and about assess kind of that male side of things. So let's dive into it. So essentially, what do we know? So we know that every second men make over 1,500 sperm. And by the time you've even just listened to me saying that, if you're one of our male patients, you've already made thousands. But the catch is not all sperm are created equal. And kind of how I describe this to my patients is some swimmers are Olympic level swimmers, others not so much, and they struggle to even get into the pool. So I think that's where we want to kind of say, hey, what's going on here from that perspective? And then spermatogenesis, which is essentially just the process of sperm production. It happens in somewhere called the seminiferous tubules in the testes. And on average, men can make up to over 100 million sperm daily. So it's an ongoing process. They're always making kind of new sperm. And it takes kind of between 60 to 7 days on average for a sperm cell to fully mature. So one of the advantages on the male side of things is that men are always making new sperm. They have the capacity to make new sperm. So even if we see abnormalities in a semen analysis, we're like, okay, we have time to fix this. We have time to support this. And we have the ability to make a really positive impact on the next batch of sperm that are going to be made and kind of, that we're seeing 3 months from now, which I always kind of explain as such a great window of opportunity because when we think about on the female side, in terms of eggs, we can't influence really ovarian reserve. We can have a significant impact on egg quality, but we really can't change the number of eggs, which is very different than when we're talking about the male fertility kind of side of things, where it's like, no, they actively are making new sperm all the time. So we do have the capacity to change what those new sperm look like, how many new sperm are being made, et cetera, and kind of within that window of time, which is really cool. So Sasha, walk me through kind of when we're talking about looking at sperm, what things are we looking at? What are we measuring, et cetera?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think also in kind of busting some of those myths, right? Like one semen analysis is not enough to get the whole picture. So, like you said, there's about 3 months that you have to make change. And so the choices that you can make now really set the stage. So, when I'm looking at that semen analysis, we're looking really at kind of four main factors. Count being one of them. So, when we are measuring sperm count, we're really talking about how much semen or sperm is present in that semen sample. And we look at the WHO guidelines. So a normal sample should have a volume of about 1.5 milliliters or more. The concentration should be about 15 million sperm per milliliter. And that's kind of where things get interesting, right? These numbers are an average. So they're going to give us a benchmark, but they do not tell us the whole story because let's be honest, if someone's going to hand me a cup, point you to the bathroom and leave you alone with a magazine that has been there since 2003, you're probably not really feeling in your most zen. So nerves and stress.
I'm actually like crying laughing because I've had these conversations with some of my male patients so much. And one of my patients, I hope he listens to this because he'll know that this is his story that he told me, was essentially like going through this experience and then going into the washroom and just like the magazines just not being in a state that you would anticipate. And he's just like, here I am, like, I'm already stressed. I'm like in this situation. He's like, I ran into someone I knew in the waiting room and the girl didn't read my requisition properly. So she just like shouts out that I'm here for a semen analysis.
No.
And then have to go give the sample. And he's like, nothing like a little bit of pressure, right? Like there's just like so many variables that you're just like, oh my goodness. And then however you need to do your business at that time. And then you're just like, it's almost this is like a walk of shame sometimes kind of returning that sample too. And they're just like, oh my gosh. Like
that was it's such a beautiful way to explain it. And I feel like this is where I give patients a disclaimer. And I've seen so many blank stares because the general awkwardness of test day can influence the results, right? So that can sometimes make count look lower than it would be in a natural setting. And that's why we don't rely on that as a single measurement, but we're really looking at the bigger picture. So we're looking at count plus motility, how they move, how they're shaped, and the volume. And so if that first test doesn't look great, I say to people, don't panic, right? It might not mean that anything is broken. It just your situation wasn't exactly inspirational. And so that's where we're then kind of looking at motility, right? So how are sperm moving? Because they do need to swim pretty long distances to reach the egg, and good motility is key. So if we're thinking of a marathon, right, you don't just need runners, but you need them to be strong. You need them to be moving
Olympic
in the right
runners.
Exactly. Like you don't want to see your sperm moving in the other way when the finish line is, faced in a different direction. So again, looking at numbers, I would say at least 40% should show good movement, with about 32% showing that progressive motility, meaning that they're moving forward in a straight line. And then the next piece is morphology, right? So this is a shape and the structure of sperm. So that normal sperm that we want to see has an oval head, there's a long tail, and that tail is going to actually carry genetic material and propel forward. So if the shape is irregular, that can affect the ability to fertilize an egg. So we want to see at least, I would say 4% should have normal morphology. So that's both shape and structure. And then I think another one that not maybe not talked about as much in practice because it's not part of that just general semen analysis is DNA integrity, right?
Yeah.
This is
DNA fragmentation. Yeah. I
exactly.
advocate often for that additional testing with some of my infertility couples or kind of
Yeah.
couples that, for a variety of reasons, either A, they just haven't gotten pregnant and things look pretty good on the female side, or even we know it's a really big factor with repeated miscarriages.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that one is one that is telling us about the genetic quality of the sperm, right? So the blueprint it carries, because like you said, if count looks good, if motility, morphology, if all of that looks good, damaged DNA can still impact chance of conception or can affect embryo development. So a lot of that is linked to oxidative stress, lifestyle factors, and even environmental exposures, which I find is very empowering in the conversation because those are the things that we can influence. It's not just a matter of luck, but it's those modifiable factors.
Yeah, and one of the things too, like I obviously work a lot in the field or supporting people with fertility. And one of the things I'll also look at is for couples doing an IVF cycle and after their egg retrieval, like how many make it to actually become embryos in those day 5 blastocysts. If we see a really significant attrition rate kind of around day 2 or day 3, that's where we're asking questions as well around, okay, has DNA fragmentation been assessed? Is this something, because we see the male genetic side carries such a dominant part in the development of the embryo at that time that if all of a sudden we see a bunch of those, those early embryos arrest and they don't continue to develop into a day 5 blastocyst, that's where we're like, okay, did something happen from the male side of things? And I will always kind of say to patients, like, it's almost like we say, okay, female DNA, male DNA kind of combines, but if the male side is less, I guess, more fragmented or there's less integrity there, it's almost like it kind of just goes to mush whenever it combines. Not a great analogy, but that's kind of what we think, okay, just doesn't have the capacity to continue to develop. And we also know as well that if on the female side of things, we have quote unquote someone with advanced maternal age, that the capacity for their eggs to actually correct for DNA fragmentation reduces as well. Whereas if we have, a younger patient, we actually do see that their oocytes or their eggs have a higher capacity to actually correct some of that DNA fragmentation. So again, just another variable that sometimes we think about if we're like, hey, do we want to advocate for this additional testing? Because it's not like specifically with the DNA fragmentation, it's not a part of a standard workup. So oftentimes you have to pay additionally out of pocket for it, but also advocate for that additional test on top of just a standard semen analysis.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think it's one of those things where sometimes it's like the more you know, the more then we can work with, right? Like the more factors that we can start to change. Whereas the conversation can also sit with the more you know, the more anxiety it can bring too. So we're always kind of like walking down that fine line when I'm having these conversations in practice.
Yeah. And I think holding space, right? Like, especially when someone's been on that journey for a long time, I've seen so many situations where the female partner is incredibly invested and trying to even get the male partner to go for that baseline testing is like pulling teeth. I say that I have some male partners that have been the biggest kind of cheerleader advocate, being like, yeah, whatever you need me to do, 100%, I'll make these changes, I'll go to this lab, I'll do whatever. But equally as true as holding space for, I think there's still sometimes this perspective that it's always a female factor. And from that perspective as well, it's like, okay, the female partner gets poked and prodded with probes up in places so many times a week that you're just like, I think there's like this term that they use in the fertility world now is they nickname the ultrasound like Wanda, because it's like anytime someone's been through that and they've gone through cycle monitoring or they're doing timed intercourse cycles or IUI or IVF, the female partner is literally going for blood work and transvaginal ultrasound. So there's like this long probe that's getting up the vaginal cavity to assess the endometrial lining and assess how the follicles are developing multiple times a week. And they might have already done this 3, 4, 5 cycles. So I'm like, hi, buddy, the worst you need to do is if you don't feel comfortable with the old crusty magazines, is like, pull up something on your phone. You get to do your business in a cup. You get poked maybe one time. You got this, you know? You can do it.
Well, there was a video circulating where it was a partner who was saying, oh my gosh, like you make all these changes. And then if everything is successful, you're carrying baby for 9 months and you can't drink and you're watching the way that you eat and you're taking all these supplements. The least I can do is maybe, for 3 to 4 months, make those changes myself. So maybe we can talk a little bit about nutrition and dive into that piece, because really those are things that we do every day, right? Most of us are not fasting, most of us are eating. So how does food play into sperm health?
Yeah, it's a really good point. And I think it depends too. Like, we advocate a lot in our clinic for testing for insulin and understanding what your metabolic health is doing. Equally for all of our female patients, but if we have a male fertility patient, we know there's really significant associations between inflammation, insulin resistance, and gut health impacting sperm quality, quantity as well, but quality as well. So we're saying, okay, what do those things kind of look like? And we're assessing those in blood work, but also how is what you're eating, how you're moving body also potentially playing into that. And we do see that males that have higher antioxidants in their diet, that have a combination of both plant-based and meat-based proteins, that focus on improving that insulin resistance, that are moderately active, they do have better sperm quality. And we know those factors impact sperm quality. And there's different ingredients that we think about, and nutrients, I would say specifically when we're talking about sperm health, that we could get a little bit kind of more specific about, whether that's zinc, vitamin A, vitamin E, selenium, which are all really important vitamins and micronutrients needed to support optimal sperm production. And sometimes we're getting those through food-based sources, or other times we're adding in targeted supplementation to augment what we're able to get through food. But it's a really big conversation. And there's always going to be that like person in the background that's like, but I know someone that was drunk and shit-faced at a party. Am I allowed to say shit-faced on this? Oh, I just said shit-faced. I probably used to be talking like that, but this is them now. And that crushes McDonald's and takeout food, and they had no problems with conception. Like, I think there's always that like small percentage that's always going to challenge the status quo and be like, yeah, but like my friend, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, okay, cool. We know that it's not 100% rule, but it's like, we also can't deny the research that it's like all of these factors play a role. And if we're in a visit and we see abnormalities on a semen analysis, we're going to have those conversations around changes that we recommend, changes that the male can make to optimize what those results were, or optimize factors that might be influencing sperm quality and production.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it's one thing to say that it's worked for someone and they've done all these things, right? And that's a conversation. Ultimately, it can work in the best of conditions, it can work in the worst of conditions. But if this is something that we can change, right? If we can lean on food and have a little bit more antioxidants in our diet, like some of the ones that you mentioned, they can act like those firefighters and protect that sperm DNA, take out that oxidative stress, because that's going to result in that stronger sperm.
Yeah. And then I think the other important conversation is like, outside of just nutrition, some of those like other lifestyle factors that can influence it. So big ones that are going to be really harmful to sperm: alcohol, tobacco, cannabis, drugs of any sort, and even nicotine, because I know nicotine pouches have become super popular, but it can impact blood flow, it can impact sperm motility, higher DNA fragmentation, etc. So we're always kind of doing that lifestyle kind of screening as well to say, hey, is there any consumption in these areas? How much consumption is that? And is that a variable that we have to modify from that perspective? And I think it's really underrated how significant those things can impact it. And a lot of like fertility clinics, or especially if they're preparing for IVF, they'll say, absolutely none of those things. Complete abstinence 3 months before a retrieval and 3 months before you give your sample, because it can have such significant impacts on the outcomes whenever they're going in to give their sample from that perspective, that they're just like hard no. And if you need any support around that, let us know. But absolutely not. You're spending $20,000 in this IVF cycle. This is what we need from you.
Absolutely. Yeah. You're really going to want to make sure that your lifestyle choices, right? Whether that's sleep, whether that is alcohol, whether that's drug use, like all of those things are in line because, yeah, like you said, if we are spending so much of money, then every stressor on the body is like a withdrawal from your bank account. But that healthy choice is that deposit. So we really want more of those deposits. And so if it's sleep, we're saying, okay, we know that men who sleep less than 6 hours have lower sperm count compared to those that maybe even get 7 to 8 hours of sleep. The other big one too is night shift work, right? A lot of my male patients do have a different schedule. And so how that disrupts their circadian rhythm is also going to impact that sperm production. Movement is another one, right? Like double-edged sword when it comes to male fertility, but I find that it's going to improve circulation, it's going to improve insulin resistance and support that healthy weight and boost testosterone. But then on the other side of things, if we're excessively training or overtraining, that can also impact testosterone and sperm production.
Yeah, we know that the testes have to be about 2 to 4 degrees cooler than body temperature to support optimal sperm production. So it is a delicate conversation that we're like, okay, you do want activity, but too much activity can overheat your balls. I'm just going to word it like that. And we do see that if there's sustained increased testicular temperature, that it can impact sperm production. Now, sometimes there's in a situation where, depending on someone's job, depending on like what is required, that they don't always have the option of being able to modify the requirements of that position. That can still be a contributing factor in that increased testicular temperature. So that's also often when we're also like, okay, is there any other variables that we can do to quote unquote cool down your balls? And interestingly enough, there's actually multiple companies that make really specific boxers that, play a role in being able to cool down the balls quicker, decreasing the testicular temperature. And again, I think it's important because it's like, okay, factors we can and can't control. You may not be able to control what you do for work and what your work or your job requires from you, but can we modify what you're wearing for underwear? Can we modify, for example, when you do get home, do you need to ice your balls? Because that's also something that I've prescribed for some of my male patients if I think heat is a factor. And they kind of look at you like, pardon? But at the same time, we're like, okay, we can't control maybe what your job is. If it's exercising and you're over exercising, then we can modify that. But if it's job related, arguably, we're like, okay, are there any other variables that we can do to try and mitigate some of that damage at the same time? The same thing is true regarding like what type of underwear males are wearing. So kind of really tight briefs versus like something that's a little bit more breathable as a potential variable as well to think about, okay, is this going to provide a little bit of support for the temperature down there?
Yeah, I love the tight clothing. I also find the other big one that you didn't mention was laptops. I can't tell you, I mean, I do it too. I'm guilty of it, but you're sitting on your couch and you're trying to get some work done. The laptop is placed directly on your lap. We can't necessarily see that radiation, right? We don't necessarily maybe see, feel it, but trying to limit having that, maybe putting it on a desk instead, even limiting hot tubs, saunas, seat warmers. If you're listening to this and you're in your car and you have your seat warmer on, right? I feel like I'm always yelling at my partner. I'm like, you better put the cool setting on because that's also going to increase temperature. And that's something that, again, cozy, but a swap that we can make because if we're already knowing that, okay, environmentally, because of our occupation, we're getting exposure, then that's something that then we can try and change.
Yeah, and hot tubs and saunas also fall into that, right? I think there's such a big movement in the wellness industry right now for having those pieces as part of your wellness routine, and they're amazing in so many ways. But if you're on a fertility journey and you're sitting here as a male being like, okay, something's been flagged on either my semen analysis or something, that I, again, want to be like, what can I do to improve this? What can I do to support my half of the equation? That's also something that we're having a conversation about. If that's part of your wellness routine and your semen analysis looks perfect, okay, then we're not always kind of just like nailing down the hammer and being like, you need to do this. I think part of this is the conversation that here are a bunch of variables that can impact it. If there's something flagged on the semen analysis, we're going to have to intervene a little bit differently versus if you have some of these lifestyle habits or some of these factors, but everything looked really good. That's a different conversation as well. And yeah, I think that is important to just kind of lay out, because then people will be like, okay, I have no fun at any time. I can't do any of the things.
We don't have to live in our bubble, but it can feel like that. I can definitely empathize with that feeling. The one thing that I did want to chat about is endocrine disruptors.
Yeah.
Their role, do they play a part? How can they impact count, quality? Is there science behind it?
100%. I think all of the parameters, right? And increased oxidative stress, we see changes to testosterone, changes to hormones. That's going to impact not only production, but also how they're being produced and the quality. And it's something that we're exposed to every day, whether you're looking at BPA, pesticides, phthalates, etc. We're never going to be able to completely avoid it. That's just the reality of today's day and age and what we're exposed to. But I think it's definitely worth a conversation, because we have a lot of research actually that has the potential to impact both male and female fertility. So again, it's always that conversation of factors we can control. We can do easy swaps. We can switch to using glassware as opposed to plastic containers. We can take the lids off our hot coffee. We can try to minimize touching paper receipts, because there's a coating most of the times on paper receipts with BPA that is one of the chemicals that can impact both male and female fertility. Like things that we're like, okay, what are easy ones that we can modify? Do we want to look at our personal care products? Do we want to minimize artificial air fresheners in the house and Febreze and those Glade plugins, which arguably have, or different generations have? That was part of what they grew up with. But again, I think knowledge is power. And if we're in a situation where we are having difficulty conceiving, then we want to look again at those modifiable factors that it's like, okay, those are relatively easy swaps to make and kind of modify in our environment without feeling that we need to like overanalyze every single thing. So it's like, okay, ditch the plastic containers, unplug any artificial kind of air fresheners, even with those two things, and stop touching paper receipts. We're like, okay, we've already reduced our exposure substantially.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I know I love my Bath and Body Works candles, and they're always
Sasha, you crunchy naturopath.
Always, I know we say choose the fragrance free, choose the clean. And so, I mean, I'm cheating a little bit, but yeah, like those swaps are definitely like, as you broke them down, right? When you actually say it out loud, they are quite practical. They're easy to make. And so when it comes to those little changes impacting our overall health and the overall picture, it definitely sounds like improving reproductive health isn't just about conception, but it's really setting you up for long-term resilience and energy, which is such a empowering thing.
Well, and I think it's a really good statement, right? It's like similar as we think about kind of the female fertility side of things, kind of being a report card of overall health and how your body is working. The same is true on the male side. Is your semen analysis and your male, like your ability to reproduce, is kind of a reflection on overall health too. And specifically at EWH, like we talk about the foundations of health often, and that's blood sugar and insulin regulation, inflammation, liver and gut health and immune health, the nervous system, and then mitochondrial function. And arguably, those are really the categories predominantly that are going to impact male fertility substantially and the ability to produce good quality swimmers. So those things still apply when we're in the fertility world. And I think that is something too, separate from just the semen analysis. Like those are other pieces that if those factors haven't been worked up in blood work or those things, that it's like we also want to engage in a conversation to say, okay, do we also want to assess? Okay, we have your semen analysis results. We see some things are off. Do we want to look into why? Why are they off? Do we want to do any additional blood work? And this applies whether they're involved with a fertility clinic or not, because fertility clinics are going to have their standard workups. They're going to look at your hormones. They're going to screen for thyroid. Normally they'll check an HbA1c or an average blood sugar. But sometimes there's extra kind of blood work that we can look into, whether that's inflammatory markers, gut microbiome, screening for insulin, like some of those other pieces, vitamin D deficiencies that might be missing, that can also kind of tell us some of those pieces as to why we're seeing the numbers that we're seeing. And when we're able to identify it, it gives us an opportunity to be like, hey, how can we fix this? How can we support this from there as well?
Today's episode is brought to you by none other than Advanced Women's Health. If you are interested in diving in deeper to your health, if you are finally ready to feel like yourself, and you are finally over hearing everything's normal, everything's fine, and you want a deeper dive into your healthcare, then we are here to help you. We are currently helping patients in British Columbia and Ontario, Canada. But don't worry, if you're in another province, still reach out, get added to the wait list as we expand coast to coast. We cannot wait to work with you. Check out the show notes for more information on how to get started.
So say blood work comes back and male partner is doing the things when it comes to food and doing the things when it comes to, lifestyle. What about botanicals? Is there botanicals with evidence? Do they have a role in supporting fertility?
Yeah, and it's always a really good conversation, right? Because I think 100% they do. It depends on what we're trying to do. So are we trying to increase production of testosterone? Are we trying to increase testosterone levels? Or do you need antimicrobials because there's a gut microbiome component? Is there insulin resistance? Are we looking at berberine? That's where those are all areas. Are we looking at stress? Because stress and chronic activation of your hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis can have a significant impact on like male fertility and the ability to make sufficient levels of testosterone to support sperm production and quality. So that's another situation where we might look at herbs to say, okay, do we need something to support the nervous system? Do we need either things to calm the nervous system to support resilience to stress? And that's where we're looking at things like Laura is actually a really nice one in male patients that have a lot of stress, but that can also be beneficial for sperm quality. We might consider ashwagandha has some research with supporting testosterone production, sperm quality, as well as being something that can be an adaptogen or helping the body adapt to stress. Or we might use herbs that if we think the nervous system is a bigger component, ones that don't necessarily have specific research for male fertility, but we know that stress is a really big factor and we want to kind of mitigate that. That's where we might be looking at saffron, which actually does have research in male fertility as well. But we might be looking at saffron, valerian, kind of some of those herbs, which would be really supportive for both kind of supporting the nervous system and stress, but also some of them do having individual research in the fertility world. Those are all kind of primary situations that I would consider using botanicals. I don't know if you like separate, hormone production, nervous system, antimicrobials for microbiome or inflammation. Any ones that you can kind of think of separate from that?
Yeah, no, you definitely touched on a bunch of them. I would say another one that I reach for often is maca, where it's used for that libido, used for that fertility, and can also impact volume and motility of sperm. Spermulus is another one that I used to reach for a lot more, but used for that male reproductive health, right? And so the evidence is showing that motility and count are impacted. But I oftentimes say that supplements can be powerful, but they're not that one size fits all, because too much of something can be harmful. And so that's where we're looking at the lab testing to actually tailor supplements to the patient sitting in front of me. And that's layered onto those foundations of health that we kind of talked about, because they're not magic pills, but they can be important tools to fill in the gap.
Yeah, and it's important because there's actually a newer research study that looked at if we have too many supplements, specifically in male fertility, too many supplements, too many antioxidants, that it can actually cause oxidative stress and increase DNA fragmentation in the sperm. So, too much of a good thing can sometimes be a factor as well. So, it is that conversation of, okay, we want to have some really strategic supplementation in place that has good evidence, but we also don't want to overdo it, that we're doing the opposite of what we're trying to achieve. We're actually causing harm versus benefit. And there's newer technology that can actually measure oxidative stress in sperm, which is what's really neat. So being mindful that we're just not grabbing everything off kind of the supplement shelf and kind of being like, okay, where do we see in your blood work we want to support, or in your semen analysis? Are we working on morphology, or are we working on motility, or are we working on count? And how do we kind of create that specific plan for you? And which ones do we think are going to be the most beneficial for you? And kind of being really strategic about what we're layering in for that. Separate from herbs, walk me through some really specific antioxidants that we might think about for
Yeah,
supplementation.
so I would say, I mean, and we kind of touched on this in the start, vitamin C,
Yeah.
vitamin E, selenium. Those are like my powerhouse because that's going to support that motility. It's going to protect DNA. Zinc is another one. So that's really essential for sperm production. It's quite cheap too if we're adding it into your treatment plan, and it can balance testosterone. We can definitely get it from food, right? But we oftentimes are reaching for that targeted supplement to reach therapeutic dosing. Coenzyme Q10, another one that is something that, again, I'll reach for to improve not only motility, but energy production, right? Again, we can find it in food, but depending on the amounts that we're actually looking for, it's harder to reach that therapeutic dosing.
Like at our clinic, Mito Formula is like a
Yes.
product called Mito Formula, which I love for both. Like I'll use it often in female fertility, but equally for male fertility because it has a good dosage of CoQ10. It has a good dosage of L-carnitine. It has some glutathione in it, which are all kind of cofactors needed for energy production, but also have independent research for supporting motility and morphology as well for sperm. So a lot of times, again, because we're in a situation where we're often supporting the female partners, it's, hey, person, you're aware, general statement. I'm recommending this for you because we're working on your egg quality. But if you wanted to give it to your husband in the morning as well to take every morning, great. That would be
It's all right. I know. I always say that. And then my female patient is looking at me like, oh, they're not going to do any of this. And then that's a whole different conversation because I say it takes two to tango, but we're going to treat who's in front of me. But absolutely, the Mito formula is often like I refer to as that like golden drink because you get so much packed into one scoop. And so that one there is a big one. Omega-3 is another one, right? That building block for your sperm cell membrane. And so we've actually seen that lower levels, the research shows that it's associated with reduced motility and abnormal morphology here. So that's where, again, I have patients will tell me like, no, but I'm eating fish and I'm eating, or I think I'm getting my dose of omega-3s in my diet, but
yeah.
again, we're looking at larger amounts there. So those are kind of like the big ones. And folate is another key one that I find is quite helpful. Again, that folate piece is going to help with DNA synthesis and quality too. So it
Yeah.
doesn't have to be complicated, but it's a general guideline. And again, it's very targeted to blood work and very targeted to the patient sitting in front of us based on their lifestyle.
For sure. So, kind of just like summing things up, if you had to give a takeaway, so whether that's a male listening to this that just wants to be kind of saying, hey, we're planning for conception and I want to do whatever I can to kind of support my side of things,
Yeah.
or if it's a situation that they've been trying for a while, or there's something that's been identified on their semen analysis and they're like, is there anything that I can modify? Give me a couple of your key takeaways.
I would say the first one is definitely using fertility as that wake up call, right? It's a chance to not only assess your sperm quality, but your health habits. And like we talked about, the things that you do today are going to impact your results 3 months down. So making sure that nutrition and movement and sleep, stress, the things that we do on a day to day are in line, that's a big thing. I would say also making it as realistic as possible, right? Like we're not just trying to aim for a higher count, but sustainable habits. So if we're walking daily, if we're eating whole foods, we're trying to do that daily, reducing alcohol and just tracking your progress. That's what I really love when we're looking at patterns, right? The lab tests, the metrics that we use, or even how you feel physically and mentally, that can really motivate change because those improvements in fertility are going to mirror that like energy and vitality piece of things.
100%. Yeah, it's a really good point. And I love that we're having this conversation. Obviously, there are situations where we see changes to a semen analysis and there's conditions associated with a male factor that don't have modifiable factors. And I just wanted to acknowledge that piece as well, because if someone's listening to this and they're like, okay, I'm in this situation, I've been told I have this diagnosis, taking this supplement isn't really going to fix that. And I just want to hold space for that as well. And that oftentimes there are the possibilities that, there's some factors that are not quantifiable impacting count or impacting quality. And whether that's a varicocele, which would be diagnosed with a scrotal ultrasound that's impacting and may or may not need a surgical intervention, whether or not, there was a really significant virus or autoimmune condition or something like that that caused permanent damage to the cells that make sperm, and we're not able to regenerate that tissue. And that's caused a permanent issue that we're not going to be in a position that we have the ability to get those back or improve those. And there are situations where that is the case. Just wanted to hold space for that as well. But really happy that we're having this conversation around factors that we can control and can modify and things that we can do to support and improve. Yeah. Kind of from there.
Yeah.
Cool. So any kind of last kind of thoughts before we wrap up today's episode?
We really covered a lot of it. I feel like we walked through different myths as we were going. And again, I think the biggest thing here, right, is knowing your role. If you're a male listening to this, you are not just a passenger on the ride. You are part of the journey. You're that co-pilot, and 50% of your child's DNA is going to come from you. And so that's a big thing and it's quite empowering. And, it's age matters, our lifestyle matters, all these things matter. And so I think bringing this conversation and having this chat was really important because it really spotlighted a lot of that.
Yeah. Feed your swimmers with the right fuel, protect them, don't overheat them, cut out anything that's sabotaging them. Yeah.
Absolutely. I feel so bad for the little guys that don't make it into the pool, but hopefully some of the things that we kind of talked about today helped to build those Olympic swimmers.
I love that. I love that so much. Awesome. Thank you for joining us today, and we look forward to the next episode.
Thank you so much for listening. I hope that you had as much fun as we did. And if you loved today's episode, share it with a friend and leave us a review. That is how we spread this message, and that is how we are going to revolutionize healthcare in Canada for women. Have a beautiful day and be well.